Okay, can you see my PowerPoint slide?
Okay, okay.
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. Today I would thanks to Prof. For giving me the chance to share with you the research interest that I'm actually pursuing now for my PhD. And thanks to Ms. Saw to actually helping me to coordinate this as well. So the topics I'm going to share with you today is about these weight perceptions in virtual reality. Okay. I'm going to go through this flow where I start with the introductions that I'm going to talk about how the humans perceive weight, and we'll talk a little bit about the weight illusions. And I'm going to share with you the development of the weight perceptions in VR, and we are going to look from the perspective of haptics and as well as pseudohyptics. And then we talk a little bit about the challenge and also the future works. Okay. So first of all, let's take a look at since the 1968, the conception of the first head-mounted display. So the advancement in VR has come a long way. And as of now, year 2021, all the big companies actually have commercialized their headsets, and it's become much more accessible to the public. So there's, however, the remote controllers that we have that come with that commercial set, right, is capable of providing only the basic inputs, and it gives us some very simple haptic feedback like the vibrations. So it's a need for us, to have more realistic feedback in the VR. For example, we can simulate the object properties such as the shape, size, weight, temperatures, and textures. So why weight perceptions? The needs for weight perceptions is apparent, especially in training field. Like for example, in the tasks where need precisions are crucial for like microsurgery training. So the surgeon may need to precisely feedback to receive the weight of his or her tools, or to ascertain how to adjust the force applied onto the affected area. And the weight perception also important in the assembly line. Especially like, for example, fragile objects are produced. So the employee should be able to perceive the weight of the product so they can successfully transfer their skill onto the real world. And definitely in gaming, so different weight perceptions can actually give VR gaming more realism experience. So the player can feel the different weight. For example, in the bowling game, you can feel how heavy the difference ball is. But we have a problem here is in the VR environment, everything's weight the same. It's the weight of the remote controller. So a feather and a ball, it gives you the same kind of weight sensations, which is the weight of that controller that you're holding. Okay. So back in the, before we look at the technologies that is research by in this area, we look at how we want to understand how humans perceive weight. So back in the year 1834, this verbal actually already studied how humans perceive weight. And the main factor that influences the perception of heaviness is the sense of force. Right? There's basically two forces behind these weight perceptions, which is the gravitational force that pulling down the object, and the grasping force and pulling up lifting force that our humans hands apply. So if one lifts the object with a small lifting force and it proves it's unsuccessful, then we will increase repeatedly until we can effectively find a force that can help to lift the object, and this gives us the sense of heaviness. Weber said that like the weight discriminations, right, is more effective if the object is lifted rather than is placed on your hand passively resting on the table. So when we look at the weight of an object, mainly there's two forces involved, which is a cutaneous force, is a touch sense in the skin. Okay, and it is constitute the outer information perceived by these megareceptors when you touch and grab an object. The next force is proprioceptive force, which is the internal informations involving your muscles or joint positions during your lifting, which is involve the muscle of spindles and the tendon organs. So this is called these proprioceptive forces. So when we lift an object, these two forces will give us the information for us to judge the informations to know how the things weight. So, however, the findings show that the discrimination of an object weight is not a distinct somatosensory task, not only by the force. The discriminations of the object also influenced by other factors. For example, the visual informations. It gives the us the information for the object characteristics, for example, size, color, and material. And all this actually contribute to the judgment of the weight that human makes. But this is a more cognitive demanding process. So theoretically, as we know, perceptions of the object weights is determined by its mass, right? So with the gravitational constants, the force applied will directly relate to how heavy the object feels. But however, in reality, right, the object with the same mass, it could result in different sense of weight. Like for example, you look at this picture, you will have a different sense of heaviness, like which one is the most heaviest. Okay, so this phenomenon that we claim as a sensory motor mismatch, we also call it a weight illusions. So next we will discuss the weight illusions from the perspective of force perceptions, object properties, and also the cognitive factors. So first, let's take a look at the weight illusions generated by the force perceptions. There's a few effects that can influence the individual's somatosensory feedback. So the first is the muscle fatigue. During fatigue, right, the object are unable to accurately estimate the force of contractions, and you will overestimate the force owing to the increase in the fatiguing of the muscle. Okay, the increase of the effort and the overestimation of force led to the increase in the perceived heaviness. For the flexor sensitivity, it can impact the judgment of your weight. Okay, when you lift the object with the thumb, if that is anesthetized, you will feel the object is heavier. Okay, gripping configuration or style also will contribute to these weight illusions. Change in your grasp configurations. For example, when you're lifting an object like a more slippery object, you need to apply more grip force to stabilize the object in hands. So it will influence your perceived of heaviness. A slippery object is always perceived heavier as you apply more grip force to it. And for example, if you hold an object with different configurations of 5 fingers against 2, so a wide grip compared to a narrow grip, and it will give you a difference of sense of the heaviness. The sensory motor memory will also influence. Like for example, the perception of weight is claimed to be biased according to your previous lifting experience. Experiments have done that, saying if that you lift a heavy lift and then if the next lift you'll feel that it's lighter, because there's influence from your history previous lifting. Object properties also influence the weight illusions. There's a few famous weight illusions that introduced by the different researchers. So the most famous one is the size weight illusions introduced by this Charpentier at 1891. Okay. It's saying that when these two objects have the same mass, but when it's different volume, the larger objects always feel lighter. We always say the larger is heavier, but if let's say they are having the same weight, the larger object is always feel lighter compared to the smaller. And another illusion is the material weight illusions described by Wolfer on 1898. This saying that the object with the identical weight and size, it will be look heavier when it's actually have a material such as metal and brass, compared with, let's say, the material is a wood or polystyrene. Although they have the same mass, but it will feel lighter for the object with this less dense material. And for shape weight illusions, described by Dressler, 1894, is saying that different shape object, although they are having the same mass, it actually have a different heaviness sense. So, like for example, these two, the weight of these tetrahedrons is found to be consistently underestimated compared to this cube. So cube is always feel heavier compared to the tetrahedron. And next is the temperatures weight illusions. So from Weber, 1850, he had run an experiment and noticed that cold objects actually is perceived heavier compared to the warm objects. And color of brightness, these illusions is described by Decam on 1917. Saying that the object with different colors, although same shape and same size, they have a different heaviness sense. Darker objects are generally heavier compared to their lighter color counterparts. So the next factors that can influence the weight illusion is the cognitive factors. Cognitive factors is involved, because weight perceiving involve the sub-processes of sensory, you sense it, then you have perceptions, and then you make decisions. So the somatosensory information is processed to form a percept of weight, then followed by a decision to transform this information, this percept, into a report of heaviness. So it involves some cognitive factors that one of the experiments is tested on this conceptual expectancy by Ellis and Letterman on 1998 using this golf ball illusion. This is a famous research that lots of people quoted this. It's saying that the golf ball, the practice golf ball and the real golf ball, because it's different weight, the practice golf ball and real golf ball, so it's presented to the golfers and non-golfers to perceive the weight. Both kinds of ball are altered so that they have the same weight. Okay? In reality, it's different weight, but they alter it and make it the same weight. So the practical balls are known to be weighed much less than real ball by golfer. It's the same weight, but the golfer said that the practice ball is weighed less. This is because they have the expectancy. You actually have the experience that you know that the practice ball is always lighter. So even you give it the same weight, it will always influenced by these conceptions and saying that it's lighter. Okay? And for the non-golfer, they judge them exactly the same. Another case is the doors illusions by Dishker on 2008. Is saying that the multiple doors represent the humans with different age sets, which is present to the participants. And it's noticed that the female's doors is always expected to be weighed less than the male. So this actually explains the conceptual expectancy, that's the influence on the weight illusions. So I've done a review on these weight perceptions in VR. Total, there's 2,000 plus papers extracted from different sources. And after filterings by the keywords and the abstract, as well as those paper without the weight perceptions analysis results. So end up we have 65 literature out of the 2,000 that is relevant to the weight perceptions in VR. So from these literatures, right, I've made a diagram here. We can see that before year 2015, the research works are mainly conducted in a non-VR HMD platform. And you can see that since like 2015 onwards, that's this green color one. There's an increase, tremendous increase in the research on the VR HMD's platform. It's probably due to the Facebook that acquired the Oculus in 2014. So the HMD is commercialized and is more consumer friendly. So before 2015, you can see that the research mostly is in these a few platforms. For example, the non-immersive desktop VR, these it is. So where a computer monitor is used as display to provide a graphical interface. Or this one, the non-immersive is this one. Okay, they just use a normal desktop for it. Then the semi-immersive is this one, where the graphic is used to reflect from an LCD monitor in a mirror over the workspace. And then there's another one is a cave platform. It's an automatic virtual environment using projector to project image between 3 to 6 walls of the room in a cube size. Okay. So further analysis was done by categorizing the techniques using the literature into the category of haptic and pseudohaptic. So in haptic, we have also separated two, direct haptic and indirect haptic. So direct haptic is the major stream of the weight perception research, focusing on the innovations of haptic devices that can generate the gravitational forces or direct proprioceptive force sensations when you grab, hold, or lift a physical object. This device is capable of generating real force and give you a realistic feeling. But however, the trade-off is normally need to be external grounded, and so is a little bit bulky, and thus is lack in the mobility. Next one is the indirect haptic. Indirect haptic is focusing on most of the time is simulating the feeling of the weight by generating these non-gravitational haptic forces through the tactile sensations. And normally it's a smaller actuators involved and we have a better mobility. Pseudohyptics did not involve any haptic devices, so it primarily relies on the visual, the eyesight. Visual stimuli to alter and presented the object to create these weight illusions. So it's all definitely is high mobility and it didn't involve any hardware, so easy to set up. If we look at this pie chart, right, you can see that almost 2/3 of the studies is focused on the haptics, 57% of it, followed by the pseudohaptic, and hybrid is the combinations, techniques used of pseudohaptic and haptic in the research. So before we look at the haptic use in weight perception, let's take a quick look on what is haptic. Okay, for haptic, traditionally, these haptic technologies is enable user to interface with the virtual environment through the sensations of touch. Like it can apply force, vibration, or motion to the user. So just now we talked about the cutaneous force and also the proprioceptive force, right? It can be simulated using haptic with this tactile feedback and also the kinesthetic feedbacks. So traditionally, kinesthetic feedback device use a grounded manipulum to impact the forces on the user, such as this Phantom, Omni, and also the Omega-6. This is the commercialized haptic interfaces that we have. It can provide physical proprioceptive force, but it will require larger actuator. And as I said just now, it's actually bulky and it constrained and restricted the workspace because you need to place its stations on a static place there. And then there's another one of the category is ungrounded, also known as body grounded. This interface usually is in the form of exoskeleton. So the available glove, such as cybercrafts and Dexmo, they do not have the workspace concerns as they move along with your body, okay, because you wear it on your hands. But it's also facing a challenge of high cost and the technical complexity. Like this Dexmo glove, right? as I inquire with this Dextro robotics company, the quotations they give me for one set is actually US dollar of 12K. So it's very expensive. And grounded haptics actually have the challenge as well in conveying the sense of object weight, because it is hardly able to render the downward forces of the weight or the gravitational forces without connecting it to the physical world, because it's only attached to your body. So this is one of the quick video about the Dexmo.
Thanks to the VR/MR headsets, we can now easily observe and hear the virtual world. But when can we interact with it more naturally? Presenting the new Dexmo, exoskeleton that captures your hand motion and lets you physically touch the virtual objects. Dexmo is light, wireless, and is equipped with cutting-edge variable force feedback and motion capture abilities. Dexmo takes immersion to the next level by simulating a real sense of touch. It physically pulls back your fingers to fit the shape of the virtual objects, and it dynamically changes the force applied to simulate their stiffness, so that you can not only feel the physical presence of the object, but also tell the difference between a virtual stone and a virtual rubber duck by just squeezing them. With Dexmo, you can interact with the virtual world in the most natural way possible. Just like in the real world, you reach out your hands for the object and close your hands when you want to grasp it, then Dexmo will apply realistic force feedback to your fingertips, so you can seamlessly feel the object as if you're actually holding it in your hand.
Okay, so this is a very interesting product. So hopefully one day the cost can be lowered down and then it can be more consumer friendly. So let's take a look at the research initiative that apply in the haptic interfaces to generate the weight perceptions. Most of the analysis show that the type of haptic interfaces used in the weight perception renderings is focused on the handheld, the variable. Okay, variable is the major one, then the handheld, followed with the ground base. So the varying the device at the fingertips were favored over other body parts, followed with the wrist and the palm, and last is the head, body, and arm. So let's take a look at some of the haptic cues. So when I do the analysis, I actually group the literature under a different group of haptic cues. So 4 main categories of haptic cues used to simulate the weight perceptions has the inclusions as per stipulated here. There's a force, shear force, which are skin deformations, vibrations, weight shifting, or the others. So later, the discussions, we are going to look into the technologies that the researchers built in this, arranged in these 5 haptic cues categories. So you can see that the force is the highest, the most research on compared to the shear come the next, and then vibrations and weight shifting and the others. So the force is actually involved the different types of forces like proprioceptive force, contact force at palm, wrist, the grip force, and inertial force. Shear forces is those your tactile sensation, the force you apply on your fingertips, and then vibrations. You know what is that? So it just vibrate. Weight shifting is includes approaches to move the physical weight prop. So you use it to create that kind of effect. And the others is include something, for example, like the liquid inertia, muscle tension, hip motion, rotation, and so on. So we'll look into that. So the first famous category of these weight perceptions haptic interface is the force. You can look at, there's a few examples here that I extracted. This one, the Gacristis is designed this device called Master Finger 2. It's a ground-based haptic device that is equipped with 3 degrees of freedom finger module. You can see very small here. is actuated by 3 electric motors to generate the forces of different translation directions. And then this trainer Tatova designed this device called Delta Touch. It's a haptic interface that you wear on the palm. It can deliver the tactile forces to simulate the sense of the weight. The device is quite lightweight and is compact. It comprises a base with the 3 revolute joints of lower arm actuated by this servo motor and connected to an end effector that can deliver forces at any point of the palm. This device can produce up to 4.2 Newton force in the normal directions. Then next one is this present. He created this compact bracelet device called TASB. This TASB is capable of rendering the squeeze. You see it there on the wrist. So it squeezes the force as a wrist to render the sense of weight. This bracelet is incorporate the vibrations as well, and also the squeeze haptic modalities. The next one is this Haptic. Haptic have the same mechanism as present, where it also apply pressure to the waist, but is using different actuation method, which is using a pneumatic actuated pressure sleeve. You see, so this pressure sleeve filled with the air compressing the wrap and wrap over the wrist, and the pressure level is controlled by the proportions to the weight to be rendered in the virtual reality. And this haptic developed by Kato. This is a chopstick-like haptic device that mimics the sensations of you manipulating object using a chopstick by applying the forces on the fingers. So when user grabs or lift an object using the chopstick, it's a virtual object. Okay, when you lift your virtual objects using the chopstick, the vertical forces at the tips will cause the force sensation on the middle finger, thumbs, and the index finger to create a sense of weight. So this one, Kovacs presented a wrist-worn haptic device called Pivot. It actually rendered the weight of the virtual object by applying the pull force on the user's palm. This design actually comprises an actuated joint that pivots a haptic handle, this one, into and out of the user palm on demand. And the dynamic forces, when it produced, right, it can render the weight sensations of grasping and lifting an object. Let's take a look at this video. Okay, so this interesting device it is. So we won't watch the whole video. If you're interested, you can go to this link. Proceed to the next one. So this is the another mechanisms used introduced by Gutter. It is proposed a new edge jacket. It actually can create the kinesthetic movement of the arm joint. You can see from here by using the pneumatically actuated mechanism. Okay. Actually, it integrates a contraction and extension actuator inflated through the compressed air to contract the bicep and the triceps on your muscle here, and when it's resulting in the motion of your forearm towards the upper arms or move away from the upper arms. Okay. Let's take a look at the video as well. Okay, so the results show that this pneumatic kinesthetic actuations is able to let the participant feel the weight of the virtual bobble and increase the immersion experience in the VR. This is the next one from Hill. It designed this device called Thor's hammer. It looks like the Thor's hammer, right? This device is a hammer-like shape, and this consists of a cube structure connected to the handle, and the cubes is actually inside there is installed with 6 motors and propellers, which will provide 3 degrees of freedom force feedback in 6 directions in each side of the cube. Okay, this device is actually actuated by the propeller propulsion force, so you create a force feedback simulating different weights. The device is managed to exert up to a maximum of 4 Newton force. Let's take a look at the video.
Last, feeling different weights. You travel through different planets with different gravitational forces. The weight of the hammer you are holding in your hand changes based on where you are.
Okay, just a short video here. So in this 4 Newton force from the experiment, it said it can allow the user to experience up to a weight of 816 grams. Next one, the very similar one with just now from JE, also using these 2 small jet propeller attached to the left and right of the handle to create a sense of dynamic weight. So this experiment is testing on the dynamic weight to feel like there's a ball actually rolling. So the device look like this. This is the illustration in a virtual. So there's not actually there's a pen. There's not a pen. There's only this, but it will let you feel like there's actually a ball rolling. Let's take a look at the video. So this device not really render weights, but it's let you feel the illusions that the weighted object is moving on a virtual plane by modulating the speed of the propellers left or right. This is also the air resistance under the air resistant category. But in contrast to just now what we see, the active forces generated by the propellers, this one from Zenner, this device is named Drag-On. It is based on the passive haptic feedback from air resistance. So there's no actuator to generate the feedback, but it's a dynamic passive haptic device that the user will feel the airflow when it swings the devices. Okay, it can also dynamically resize its folded fan area to leverage on the airflow during the interactions. Let's take a look at the video as well. So it depends on how much weight, how much forces you want, and the fan actually can adjust the size. So it will generate a different force feedback and give you a different weight sensations. Next category is a shear force. Shear force is the forces applied on the skin. This skin deformation is the second most researched Haptic cue in rendering weight perceptions. So the first one is called gravity grapple, introduced by the Minamizawa. you look at the mechanism, what it uses is it have rendered by the weight sensation is actually rendered by a stretching fingertip with fabric belt controlled by this pulley with 2 DC motors. By wearing this device on the thumbs and index finger, the user can feel the augmented weight by holding a lightweight styrofoam cup cube, and then it can feel the inertia of the water in an empty glass as well. So if it rotates in these opposite directions, the finger here will feel a vertical stress, like pressure on it. If it rotates in the same directions, so the finger will feel a shear forces, like going to the direction of where the rotation is. This another one similar mechanism applied with this 3RS by this device by Mesto. This platform is driven by, there's a rigid platform here, if you can see, is driven by 3 servo motor to provide contact deformations stipulated at the user finger. So we place a finger here, and this rigid platform can move or press towards the user finger, and it can move left, right to give you that kind of shear forces. This is another one similar, but is render the lateral force by a plastic housing fixed above a parallelogram structure actuated by 2 DC motors, and it move a plastic cap to create the shear forces feedback on the fingertips here. So when the user positions their palm of the fingers on the device, then they can feel the skin force. The device can simulate a maximum up to 3.4 Newton force on the fingertips. So this is all similar mechanism. And another one is this from Kurita. It's actually studied the sleep conditions on the fingertips. The prototype is actually control the sleep conditions of a contact area using a transparent acrylic plate. You can see this one, actuated by a DC motor and camera to capture the contact surface. So this experimental findings suggest that sensing a sleep condition at the fingertips plays an important role to estimate the weight properties of an object. So it can control the contact conditions and create the weight illusions. This is similar. Another one by Charms is a compact screw-based actuator that can augment the user experience with these pseudo weight sensations by rendering the force at the skin stretch on the thumb. If you press on it, it can actually generate up to 4.8 Newton maximum force. So all this belongs to the same category, the shear forces on the fingertips. The next category is the vibrations. So vibrations is common actually in other devices. There's some that mix the usage of vibration and force. So for this one, you can see that Aminiya actually is developed a vibration box using the asymmetric oscillations. So it actuated by 2 crown gears engaged on the DC motor that rotates. And this gear can rotate in opposite direction in each layer. The results reveal that these heaviness perceptions on an object increase when the vibrating with these asymmetric accelerations. And this dual whips by Tanaka is another handheld haptic device designed to render the sensation of dynamic mass. The device is equipped with 2 vibrations actuator. This is using 2 vibration actuator attached to this Vive tracker. So it mimics the dynamic masses of the shaking of the virtual container. For example, like water, yogurts, maybe some particles. So it tested on it can create the sense of different particle with the shakings actions. Another one is this device called Gravity, developed by Choice, and it's rendering the mass of the virtual object with a brake mechanism and 2 vibrations actuators. So during virtual object manipulation, this device can provide the grasping force feedback simulated by this brake system, and then the contact force with the vibrators by using just now these void coil actuators. So the next category is weight shifting. Weight shifting or changing the center of mass is another technique to render the sense of weight. basically is equip the device with one or several moving dummy weights. So for example, this one, Koshiyama, this Vorak is enable the perceptions on the inner volume of the virtual weight of the object by angularly shaking the interactions. So when you shake, right, it is a bottle-shaped haptic device with a center gravity simulated by a linear motor inner weight. So there's an inner weight here inside, actuated by a DC motor. So the center of gravity within the device is rendered higher. So when the object volume increase, so mimic like this. If there's a water in there, they move the weight higher. This is the next one, Yamamoto. So Yamamoto investigate the discriminations of the content weight through shaking interaction as well by shifting the gravity center of the box-shaped device. This device actually contained weight linearly actuated by a shaft motor, so it can move along this axis. So it will accelerate corresponding to your shaking gesture. This is another wave shifting example by Zener called Shifty. Is using the dynamic passive haptic feedback device to give you these sensations of weight. Let's take a look at the video. So it enables the user to feel the weight by continually shifting the internal weight between the grip and the top end of the box. Okay, stop here, and then next is the others. So others, like for example, this liquid inertia, change using this haptic device with this inertia of the liquid to simulate the dynamic weights. This actually there's a physical mark comprises of a handheld device attached to the HTC Vive tracker and a variable device with 2 water bags that can store up to 716 ml of water. So the water bags are connected to the electric pumps, which can pump out of 330 grams of water. Another approach is to using this EMS, electrical muscle stimulations, to elicit the to give the sense of weight by stimulate the user's muscles. Okay, it elicits the opposite muscle contractions to create the desired tensions in the biceps. And create a sensations of weight. So next we'll look at the second main categories. Just now we talked about haptics, right? Another area is called Pseudohyptics Cues. This, although the weight perceptions by using haptic devices can provide more realistic feedback, but the methods have the limitations in the device weight and also your wearing comfort, and also it constrain the user's movement. So pseudo-haptic feedbacks has been used to simulate these haptics properties such as shape, stiffness, texture, or mass. It's a less expensive approach and allow a wider range of user motions compared to the haptic approaches. Pseudo-haptic is using the software-oriented approach, so it relies mainly on the dominance of the visual system. So the following discussion will talk about the haptic categorized into CD ratio, velocity, passive force, and audio-visual. So you can see that most research is on the CD ratio, followed with velocity and passive force, and followed with all the others. So we are going to look into its control display ratio is the most common techniques used. It's actually to map, to modulate the mapping between the actions of the users and the feedback provided by the system by altering the control display ratio. What does that mean is by changing the amount of the movement between the virtual and also the actual hand, or the displacements of the objects in the virtual and the actual to generate different weight illusions. Same goes for this summary. So let's take a look at this video from this appraisal. when the control display ratio is big, the participant will feel the ball is heavier. So this is another area called velocity. So when you provide with the constant force, right, the object mass is proportional to its velocity. So humans is always relate the moving speed of an object to its perceived weight. The faster the object moves, the lighter it seems, right? So like for example, like Lee, is actually in this dumbbell lifting experiments, Lee used the magnitude of lifting forces calculated from the velocity by tracking the user's hand positions. So an arrow indicator was used to guide the user to increase or decrease the speed to let the user feel the weight sensations. So the survey results show that the velocity successfully create a sense of weight and in this dumbbell lifting exercise. And same to Hira and Rosa, we won't go into details, but they are using the delaying speeds to actually manipulate the sensations of the feeling of the weight of that object. And next category is a passive force. This passive force approach is to create the illusions of haptic sensations from the voluntary force feedback exerted and controlled by the user. The exertion's force scales linearly with the object's mass, and a minimum exertion force value can be associated with the efforts required to grasp or lift an object. So you can see this Ponto and Chen actually utilize this biofeedback from EMG attached to the arm here with the combination of the visual effects to simulate the weight perceptions when manipulate the virtual object in this cave environment. So this EMG will give the signals when compared to the predefined threshold to determine the movement of the object. Either if it's enough force, then the object will be lifted, else it will drop. Hummel as well demonstrate another passive force by using the finger distance. So it actually evaluated the finger distance into the object by varying this finger tracking device on both their thumb and the index finger. So the penetrations degree will be calculated and decide the force applied to create the weight sensations. But however, this proposed method, it does not simulate any realistic kinesthetic or cutaneous forces sensors. It just gives you a visual kind of effect. So the last category is the audio-visual effects. It can, like for example, Jaragui, he investigated how to animate the virtual avatar by altered the different haptic perceptions in this weightlifting exercise. When lifting the object, like for example, the acceleration and posture of the avatar, the angle of the upper body inclinations, so it varies depending on the weight of the object lifted. So in this experiment, the real data of motion speed, like lifting posture, gesture, they are recorded for different various weights. And these motion profiles is used to compute these avatar animations and create the weight sensations when it shows on the virtual environment. And this spectrum is tested on the audio, using the audio, and it tests if the audio effect of the footstep have any influence on the weight perceptions or not. And the result indicate that the weight of the avatar is estimated as heavier when the audio filters amplify. This next one is from Oshima. This Oshima show that the sense of weight could be affected by these mixed reality visual stimulations by changing the appearance of a real object by superimposing a dynamic changeable virtual object onto it. So for example, you look at this diagram, the participants are requested to hold the handle and swing acrylic case with the weights enclosed, while different liquid virtual simulations were superimposed on the acrylic surface. So the results show that the object is perceived lighter when the virtual liquid state is moving, this one, compared to when it is not moving. Okay, so after looking at all the techniques, these a few challenges that we have in the weight perception in VR. Looking at the time constraint, I will just not going into details because this involves some technical discussions. So I'll quickly go through it for accuracy and precisions, right? Normally the weight perception's accuracy precision is measured by this formula expressed in the just noticeable difference, the GND, over the reference weight, and it's called Weber fractions, WF. Okay. So the literature reported that the higher precisions for weight discrimination with real object always compared to the virtual objects. For the virtual objects, we got the WF around 11 to 49%, whereas for the real object manipulation, we can get as low as 3.3. So it's a challenge for us to improve the WF in the virtual reality weight discriminations or perceptions. The next one is the weight discriminations of heavyweight and lightweight. So the Weber law state that when you want to detect a physical change in a stimulus, when the magnitude increase is always proportional to the magnitude of the stimulus. So the greater the increment needed for a change to be detectable if you have the more heavier stimulus. So it is a challenge to discriminate heavyweight object in VR, which is require bigger increments for the observer to detect a change. For the lightweight, right? For the lightweight, although the Weber's law state that in most cases the WF tend to be constant within a specific stimulus conditions and the modalities, but however, most of the results from the research is showing that the lighter the stimulus, the WF is getting higher. So in generally, to differentiating a variation of less than 10% for lightweight reference, that is less than 200 grams is actually very challenging. You may need a very sensitive or very precise tactile sensations to create that kind of discriminations of the lightweight. Another challenge is a heavyweight rendering. So to render a weight greater than 1 kg, generally is required a fixed setup, ground base, especially, and a constrained workspace. So it is a limitations on the devices that we have nowadays. Normally, we're not able to render heavy weights because of the weight model output. Absolute weight, if you notice that most of the research in the weight perceptions are using relative weight instead of absolute weights. So they mainly compare 2 or more objects to identify which one is heavier. So instead of being able to determine the actual weight or absolute weight of one object. So this is a challenge itself to identify the absolute actual weight. Sorry. Double hand manipulations, basically it is most of the research that you can see is using a single hand as an experiment. So from a design perspective, the challenge to develop a framework can ensure both hands, okay, both interface can work synchronically, efficient with the considerations of weight distribution model, double hand grasping behavior to create these realistic weight perceptions. This is also one of the challenge area. And this one I won't go into details. Basically, this is a general challenge that's applied to the haptic interfaces, like for example, adaptability, then the comforts and the noise. Noise is very obvious, especially when you have the actuator like using the propellers. So it will actually impact the realism of the user and also the ability to accurate perceive the weight. And then pseudo-haptic design, the challenge is because it is purely based on the virtual, this high eyesight. So the focus lifespan is very important. When the, for example, when the visual effect, right, will no longer present, when your focus of attention shift, how to keep the participants always focused, that's one of the challenge. And also the feedback indicator, you lack of this guidance or limit the user, the participant actions to achieve the desired weight perception effect. So how do you limit the speed when context is limited or render different perceptions of heaviness? So definitely accurate tracking is essential, especially in the control display ratio techniques. A slight tracking errors could affect the weight discrimination precisions. So for future work, we can look into the hybrid frameworks or models. Because the haptic interface suffer from physical limitations in weight perceptions to balance the maximum throughputs. So a hybrid framework can be explored to deploy the pseudohyptic techniques to overcome the haptic weakness to enhance the weight perceptions. And we can look at multimodality as well. So the weight is perceived through a combination of object properties, as we know, dense, and also from the force proprioceptive information from the muscle and joint. So by incorporating multimodality in the designing interface, it probably can render better weight perceptions. And realism analysis, you notice that is a lack of studies on the qualitative comparison of the realism in weight perceptions amongst the studies. Mainly is owing to the different characteristics and features of the weight perception techniques and the underlying experiment setting in different research. So the evaluations of realism is crucial, especially in the pseudohaptic approach. Mid-air haptics may be another area that we can look into because like for example, the ultrasonic actuations is one of the methods that attract most of the interest from researchers in recent years. So the strength of the mid-air haptic is an issue at the moment because we need to be overcome as it only can, the threshold that we can render the force is usually small. But given the nature of the mid-air haptic that it can provide a contactless haptic feedback, we have the potential to create a flexible weight perceptions. Another one is the encounter type. Encounter type haptics provides haptic feedback by positioning a tangible surface for the user to encounter. So the recent area focus is on the drones to actually render the kind of different sensations. So a drone can capable of actively generating kinetic energy, which could create directional force to simulate the sense of weight. The weight sensation also can be rendered by presenting the physical surface to user through the dynamic positioning of passive probe. So you can let the drone carry the physical probe to the locations and to let the user encounter with it. Let's take a look at this example by one of the researchers. What he did is actually move the drone that carrying that using the render the force by using the kinetic energy to create the kind of weight sensations. Let's take a look at this video. So the drone actually move to the area where the hand is and giving a handle that the user can hold. So depending on the weight that you want to generate. So it's influenced by the kinetic energy from the drone itself. So the conclusions, and we know that now Facebook is building this metaverse. So this VR and AR definitely is envisioned as the next major platform for the communications. And the advances in these 5G technologies and all the new VR hardwares, for example, Oculus Quest 2 and HTC Vive, this open up a much more infinite possibility for this AR/VR application development. Thus, there's a pressing need to actually provide a more realistic sensations in humans and virtual interaction process. So despite the advancement in this haptic technology, right, it's still a massive challenge that we can see how do we make the let humans sense the weight of a virtual object in the virtual reality. So most weight simulation methods that were designed are applied to a specific application scenario and setup, as you can see the example I showed you just now. So there's still a gap to build a robust multi-gesture web perception simulation that is adaptable to different application needs. And definitely the limitations in the current approach need to be overcome by continuous exploration of new techniques and innovations. Okay, thank you. That's all about my presentation today. Sorry, I think I overrun a little bit of times, and there's a publication related to this. If you would like to read a little bit more in details, you can take a look at this, or you can email myself here.